Howdy, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Brand New Gig. We are doing a late night show tonight in honor of the blackout this upcoming Saturday. If you're joining us for the first time, we are oh so glad to have you. And if you are returning, I appreciate you so much for keeping up with us week to week. And on that note, I am very excited to introduce our guest today. His name is Nico, but you may know him best as Elite Takes from Twitter. So he will be providing the Elite for us today, and I will be providing the takes. And I think that will be making for a pretty good team. So, Nico, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. That sounds like a plan. Yeah.
Perfect. Let's see, I'm keeping my chat open so we can keep tabs on that. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of a very low-scoring Auburn affair and what is to come this upcoming weekend, we are going to do our Off the Ledge segment. It's where we offer a little bit of unsolicited therapy advice to a lot of Aggies who have been needing it over the past couple of weeks. And it seems that the better we do, the worse off our fans seem to be. And Mike Elko addressed it best is let's not be doom and gloom, but that's not going to work for people who have suffered with battered Aggie syndrome for many, many, many years. So we won't get too much into it, but I think the big question that a lot of people have had is penalties. And it's not something that you really see when you're talking about offense and defense. Those are the fun things to talk about. Penalties aren't fun. What advice do you have to offer people who are feeling like these penalties are going to kill us one day? Because we've been able to escape them most of these games, but one day it does seem like it might just be the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's like my philosophy on penalties is like you never want to play the game to the point where you have to blame it on penalties. Like there are ways to avoid it. Like you gotta stay ahead of the sticks, and of course, like it would be great if they could clean those things up. But I feel like when you're watching the game, you can definitely get caught up in that stuff. But I feel like rationally, it's not something to sweat more than the execution on the field of the team itself. And I know people feel like there were some bad calls that went our way, and I would agree. I was very sad that Marcel Reed dime got wiped off the board. That would have turned it into a double-digit win for us. But yeah, no, I feel like my advice to those who are very worried about the penalties is, if we lose a very important game, and it's because of penalties, we probably just didn't play well enough to begin with outside of the penalties. So that's just kind of my viewpoint.
Coach's Cavo Fund, I think that might be enticing. We'll see how that ends up working out. But again,
Oh, I heard
penalties.
about that.
Yes. So maybe that will be some inspiration. But again, there are definitely worse problems to have than penalties. I think that's something that Elko is not going to let slide week after week. Well, at least we would all hope. So we'll see how that continues to go. And our second issue, which again is a more non-measurable, but BAS, like we talked about. And especially, I think a lot of us think back to everyone's talking about this season replicating 2016. This is our first time we've been 4-0. It's our first time we've been ranked number 6 since 2022. And then Mississippi State 2016, we come into Mississippi State ranked number 4. Mississippi State is unranked, and we lose that game by a touchdown. And it kind of just derails the whole rest of the season. So where are you on the scale of have fully drank the Kool-Aid and are total BAS unrecoverable?
I would say I'm at like an 8 on the Kool-Aid scale, really, because they went out and for once they won a big road game. I mean, they've won plenty of big home games, but to go out into a hostile environment and make the plays you needed down the stretch, and there have just been so many devastating one-score losses. I know this wasn't necessarily a big game, but I think back to that Auburn game last year, and that's the stuff for me is like avenging losses from last year. They've really shown that they aren't going to sleep on anyone to this point, I think. And that's another important thing for me moving forward is like make sure you don't get into those trap games. And I think last year was, and really previous years, but for Mike Elko's sake, I think last year was a good lesson of the trap games. When we go up to Arkansas, and I mean LSU and Missouri are going to be big enough games to not really get wrapped up in that stuff. But yeah, no, I think my confidence in this team comes from the fact that they've honestly won a game that they weren't probably supposed to win, and
Right.
that they went out and took care of business against a team that really caught them off guard last year, and a team that I thought coming off that loss in Oklahoma and all they're complaining about the refs were going to be really fired up, and we set the tone and didn't really give them an opportunity to extremely stress us out. It was a little bit stressful, but I was never like terrified because of our defense.
And I think that's the biggest thing. So we've addressed the people's concerns mostly. We'll get into those more. But I think the biggest thing just year after year and year two under Mike Elko is just breaking pattern. Like we've seen that Notre Dame, okay, breaking the pattern of losing big away games. Okay, Auburn breaking the pattern of losing off a bye, losing a game where the target is on your back. Like people are watching A&M and waiting for A&M to do what A&M typically does. And I think the biggest thing that we saw from this Auburn game that was one untraditional for what we've seen this year and also just completely reverse of the Auburn that we played last year is our defense. That there's so many different ways you can start tackling that, but I'm just going to give you the floor to kind of give me an overview of what you saw from that defense, and then we'll kind of dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think really by far the best thing about that defensive performance, in my opinion, is how good they were against the run. I mean, Auburn had like 2 yards a carry, and the big storyline for them and what really got them some hype early in the season was that they went into Baylor on that Friday night and just basically physically dominated them to the point where the game was never really in doubt, and they just took full control of that game. And for A&M and, giving up all those yards to Robert Henry against UTSA, just a lot of frustration, in my opinion, from like our inability to set the edge at times and all these running backs springing loose down the sideline. It felt like a weekly occurrence in Kyle Field last season and really early this season. So to me, that is by far the most encouraging thing about it. Obviously Jeremiah Love, it is what it is. He's going to make plays on you. But I think for this Auburn team, we really took away their only good way to move the football. And we put the game in the hands of Jackson Arnold, which is exactly what you want to do. And I think the fact that, Auburn had a clear strength going into this game and A&M absolutely shut it down. And this was supposed to be sort of like a strength on weakness type of thing. And it ended up making them look like the weakness in the run game. So to me, that was the most exciting part about it. But, obviously it's nice to avoid the big plays in the Auburn game last year with Cam Coleman, especially. I mean, he was kept very, very quiet. And I don't know how much of that is Jackson Arnold's fault, but regardless, I think we did a great job, taking away what they do best.
Last year, Cam Coleman even more freaky than he already is as an athlete. I mean, Des Rex was probably, we'll get to that later, but he is very objectively a huge piece of this defense this year because so many people came to this year with concerns that our secondary was going to look like it did last year, which lost us a lot of games. And the second part of that is our D line, which on paper, I mean, you lose 3 guys to the draft. You can't really work around that. But we have a lot of depth. I mean, we had 5 sacks from 5 different guys. I mean, it's not a 10-sack game like Oklahoma had, but there are a lot of bright spots to this defense that I don't think we've seen until Saturday. So I think the next question is the offensive performance that we saw. Do you think that is our offense playing conservatively because there was faith in our defense, or do you think it was just a bad offensive performance? What kind of area do you lie in on that?
I don't think it was a bad offensive performance, honestly. I mean, we moved the ball really well. We got into money territory a lot of the time, and we ran the ball especially well. I mean, it was really a dominant performance, I would say, on both sides in the run game. I mean, felt like we were just pushing Le'Veon Moss for like 3 extra yards on so many plays and controlling the clock. And that's all things that are really great when you're trying to, hold off some sort of hungry team that comes into Kyle Field. And it felt like they were in control offensively. And, Marcel Reed, there's still a little bit of inconsistency there, I would say. I mean, he has missed a few of those deep balls that could
Yeah.
really break the game open at times, but I'm not going to be a doom and gloom about Marcel. I mean, he's done a lot of good stuff this season, and he's attempting a lot of ambitious throws, which I think will pay off down the road. He's not playing scared with the football in his hands whatsoever, and I hope that can improve, and I think it will for him. But yeah, no, I think really the problem was the penalties, and I know I just said to not worry about those as much, but I really do think like it's more important to show at this point in the season that you can run the ball sustainably and you can have those big plays in the passing game. And, it just comes down to making field goals at times. And honestly, like the only gripe I had, I know people are really mad at Colin Klein. I usually am a Colin Klein defender because I just feel like in any
Yeah.
given situation, people are just going to say the play call was bad if it didn't work,
Right.
and they're going to say it's good if it did work. And I would say the screen pass that got picked off was a
Yes.
bad one. I mean, when you're running
Right.
the ball that effectively, just
At will.
if it's not broke, don't fix it. I would say with that, and I think that's a learning experience for him, and that's like I said, similar to Marcel Reed. I think making these mistakes early on in the season is just going to propel us to be on the right page in those key situations later on in SEC play. So no, I think the ability to move the football was very encouraging, and that Auburn defensive line is no joke. Like that's been like their biggest strength, I think, overall as a team is their defensive line. It's allowed them to hang around against some really good offenses. So
I think coming into our game, Auburn was the third best run defense in the country. They had limited teams to about 58 yards on average, 233 over their 4 games. And then our 3 running backs ran for 233 yards in itself. And that was a big, I wouldn't say complaint from A&M, but I think anyone who doesn't sit down and watch 60 Minutes of Aggie football every Saturday is where's their run game, because that's what everyone had talked about coming preseason. And so having the issue of our offense being so multifaceted is one that we haven't experienced before. So it is very nice to know that we can go into Mississippi State with 3 very dominant backs and also a huge threat on the outside, which we'll get into Mississippi as the show goes on. But I think the biggest issue we saw outside of penalties is we start the Auburn game, you start with a touchdown, like right off the bat, first quarter. I think all of us in Kyle Field were thinking, oh, we might actually run away with this game. Everyone's talking about this game being close. It seems like there's a huge disparity on both sides of the ball. And then you just can't find the end zone. Again, you can blame penalties. You can blame the offense. You can blame whatever you want. How do you aim to capitalize on that momentum? Because I think Mississippi State is a team that likes to come out hot. I know they always vouch to have the offense if they win the coin flip. So how do you kind of mitigate that with your own momentum?
that's a good question. I mean, I know Mississippi State that they've had a very dynamic offense this year that's a threat to get a huge momentous touchdown at any point from any down, any distance. I think really the key for A&M is their corners have to continue to play as well as they have. I mean, we talked about Des Ricks just a bit ago. I think the thing that's really encouraging to me is like I feel like he's played just as well as Will Lee this year. Meanwhile, Will Lee was by far our best corner last season. So for Mississippi State, they're gonna try to. They've got a lot of razzle dazzle in their offense. They're gonna try to catch you off guard with play action, and to me that's another key is I think you've got to stop their run game the way you did to Auburn. You've got to get them behind the sticks so that they have to get a little more predictable with their play calling. So I mean, if I were A&M going into this game, I would probably continue to do what I've been doing, which is committing to stopping the run game and daring them to throw the ball over our heads, because to this point,
Right.
teams have really struggled to do that. And in comparison, I think we've let some teams get ahead of the sticks in the run game outside of the Auburn game, and that's been a concern for me. But yeah, no, I think for Mississippi State, you cannot give up that big play right away, because that's been how a lot of teams have hung around against us in Kyle Field, is getting that big break right away, getting points on the board. So yeah, no, I would trust our corners and really and try, to get a big tackle for loss, right away, get the crowd going. That always seems to be
Yes.
big for us versus, them getting 5 yards and 7 yards and 5 yards on runs right away. So yeah.
Yeah, because going into a blackout game, obviously we'll have a night game at Kyle. That's a lot of momentum that I think makes people a little more secure as opposed to playing in Starkville, which
Oh yeah.
doesn't always go our way. I mean, I think on paper, especially knowing the talent that we've recruited, we've pretty much always been a better team than Mississippi State, but the record doesn't show that. I mean, we're only 7-6 since entering the SEC. And anytime we play that team, I think there's always a little bit of a hold your breath type of situation of you never know. I think those Mississippi State teams as a whole are kind of cursed just on our record. But going into that game, Craver's rematched against his former team. There's a lot of different things going into this. And I mean, it's a 14-point spread. I mean, on paper, yeah, it seems like we're the better team. But again, you never know what could happen. This is another one of those similar to Auburn situations where you need to take care of business, even though you know that you're the better team. You can't be looking ahead. So what do you think, not just a football perspective, but just the culture that Elko's established as a whole, what is this game going to tell you about the maturity and the direction of this team?
That's another good question. I would say, I am a little bit surprised that we're favored by 14, because Mississippi State is a really good team, and in my opinion, it's a little bit criminal that they haven't been ranked, ever since they beat Arizona State. So I think definitely from the mental side, you just got that sloppy win against Auburn. There is
Right.
stuff that needs to be cleaned up, and I think from that standpoint, you'd like to see them go into this one, get another good start, but also, just keep finishing those drives against a Mississippi State defense. Sorry, I'm getting into the football side of things. But yeah, no, I think from the mental side, they, in the Notre Dame game, they had that disastrous start, and they cleaned
Right.
that up this week and had a great start. And I think that's what it's all about, is, taking these close calls as learning experiences. And I don't think that they're going to take Mississippi State lightly, even though that was a smooth game for them last year. I think Mississippi State has really proved to everyone that they are a much more serious team in SEC play this year. So I think that they might even take Mississippi State more seriously than Florida at this point. And I think going into this game, it's going to be really important for them to get that fast start and finish drives. But yeah.
Talking about the culture, do you think, I mean, these are all hypotheticals, obviously, but do you think with the Notre Dame game, you come away with a win by 1 point? The Auburn game is sloppy as is. It's like less than 4 minutes left, and it's a 3-point game. Do you think we lose those games last year or in years prior?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in years prior, that Notre Dame game is probably like a double-digit loss. We might have some big plays throughout the third quarter, a little bit of hope in the second half. And that's kind of what we saw last year was some of those, late comeback efforts that sort of fell short against, South Carolina and against Auburn. And it's like, don't get yourself into that hole. But I think we've done a good job getting out of that hole. And the Auburn game wasn't necessarily a hole, but yeah, no, I think absolutely in previous years, Jackson Arnold's going to throw a ball over our heads. They're going to get into field goal range. It's going to come down to it. And I think that there's just like a relentless confidence in our defense in the Auburn game. I think that's why they played it so conservatively down the stretch. And in the Notre Dame game, they got some big breaks from their passing game. And yeah, no, I do think it definitely feels different this year, really largely because of the weapons they have on the perimeter that can get them back into a game at any point. And, I think Elko is showing his guys, by playing that conservatively, that he really trusts them to take over a game. Like, he's not worried. I think I think that's important for the players on the sideline, is to see, like, in these later game scenarios, that Mike Elko isn't necessarily as frazzled as last year, and he has faith in them to go out and get it done and finish the job.
Yeah, I think our defense has typically been known for allowing opposing offenses to look way better than they are. We made Peyton Thorne look like he should have been a new. And knowing what we knew about Jackson Arnold, that very much could have been the case this year. And I mean, he got sacked 5 times. I think anyone who reviewed that game at all can tell you that he did not look good, and that the Jackson Arnold experiment at Auburn is probably a bust. So that is a relief in itself. And just knowing that you have a head coach that's very defensive minded gives me faith when there are questions of defense, because who better to address it? But given all of that, is there, because we talked about, I think as a whole, A&M has leverage over Mississippi State, just comparing roster to roster. Is there a position group from Mississippi State that concerns you? Which one concerns you the most?
I would say their running backs. I mean, Fluff Bothwell, he went for 5 yards a carry on Tennessee, over 100 yards last year. He's one of the better, I think, transfers from the group of 5 in all of college football. That was a big get for them. And I think, Auburn's run game was more so predicated on the fact that their offensive line was dominating. And that's where they were finding success early in the season. But, for Mississippi State, it's more about the fact that they just have an amazing playmaker. And it kind of makes me think back to the UTSA game, where Robert Henry was just this awesome playmaker that could break big plays on us. And it wasn't necessarily as much about their offensive line. So that element of it definitely does concern me a little bit, just because he's a guy that can really break a big one at any moment. And, they like going up tempo, and I just don't want us to get into a situation where all of a sudden they're running the ball at will on us, and we've got to use timeouts to get guys rest. I mean, that's the easiest way to catch a team off guard when you're on the road, is running the football effectively. I mean, I think the run game usually travels a little bit better than the pass game. And I think Fluff Bothwell is a guy that I am going to be pretty worried about until we see him bottled up for, the majority of the game.
So I think most games we've gone into this year, we've been playing against pretty run heavy offenses, or at least they have very good guys in their tailback room. Robert Henry, Jeremiah Love, Jeremiah Cobb. I would say that is what we've been prepared for. I don't think Auburn ran the ball as much as they could have or should have, but I mean, fine by me. I'll take it. But I think our run defense, at least this past weekend, has shown significant improvement, which gives me a little more confidence knowing what Mississippi State has in their backfield. And I think Blake Shapen has outperformed what most people expected of him this year too. I haven't gotten to watch Mississippi State as much as I probably should, but they are a dangerous team in that, because their expectations were so low, it's almost like a nothing to lose scenario. Where, I mean, they've already exceeded what they were projected. They were projected 3.5 wins. They're already at 4. Yep. So it's really a no lose scenario for them, which does make me nervous going into this game. What do you want to see? We'll do this in 2-parter. First parter, what do you want to see from our offense this game that either you have seen or you haven't seen yet that you want to see happen on Saturday?
I want to see the run game to continue to just run the ball until the opponent forces you not to. I mean, I think for me, that's the biggest weakness I see in Mississippi State. That Arizona State game, they basically let Arizona State back in the game because Arizona State realized that they could just run the ball at will, and they couldn't really couldn't really do anything about it. That's Mississippi State's biggest weakness. And I think, if you're A&M, you just gotta feed Le'Veon Moss and, get Ruben Owens more involved. That's another thing that I definitely want to see.
Complaint too.
That's a valid complaint, honestly, because he's looked really good. I don't really buy a health excuse at this point. We're over a year off of that injury for him. And, I think given Amari Daniels having that lesser efficiency, I'd like to see Colin Klein make that change and give him the second most touches, although Amari is useful, as a pass blocker. But yeah, no, I want to see the run game go out and take charge of this one for us, because to me, that's just the most sustainable way to win games in SEC play is is being able to run through the teeth of defenses. And I think that was always the goal when Mike Elko came in.
I think slowing the game down has always kind of been a MO. We've never been a super high tempo, fast offense. And I think I've seen Mississippi State lean into that a lot more this year.
Oh, yeah.
So both for our side of the ball and for the lack thereof on theirs, I think that is the key. And also with Marcel, he always plays better when he knows the game is not on his shoulders. When the run game is open, that opens up the field for him a lot more. And that's where we start to see that multifaceted offense is getting all three cylinders firing. So I think that's a big question mark people still have is Marcel's accuracy. Where are you kind of – because I think most Aggies are Team Marcel, I would say. I think there's a lot of people still doubting his ability to throw the deep ball, which is very fair. Where are you at with him and his performance up until this point?
I am Team Marcel. I think people just have too high of expectations, honestly. I think there's this bad narrative, I think, across college football that if you don't have like a guy with first round hype going into the season, your guy has to be at that level at all times. And we don't need Marcel Reed to be Caleb Williams or CJ Stroud for us. Those guys only come around every so often for a reason. And I think Marcel, what he has shown us this year is just clear growth in the fact that he's trying a lot of difficult throws. I mean, that's what I mentioned earlier in this podcast is, he's trying to iron those things out. He's not shying away from, risking interceptions, yet he's not throwing many. And I think that's another encouraging thing is he's throwing a lot of high percentage balls down the field. And even if they're inaccurate, they're not necessarily, horrifying decisions. And I think that's what excites me is that he's shown the ability that he can make a throw to get us right back in the game at any moment. And to me, that's all you should really want in a quarterback at the college level. And that's, if you have that, you should be grateful for it, because as we saw last week, there are some quarterbacks that have to have everything in control at all times. Everything has to be served on a silver platter for them. And they just can't really rally to get your team back in a game. And I think with Marcel, I mean, with his legs and with his arm, he's shown us time after time again that even if we do fall into a hole, he can make some really big plays to rally us down the stretch. So I am Team Marcel Reed. I just don't know why people are expecting him to have like Andrew Luck level accuracy at all times.
Yeah, and this has come up on multiple episodes is, what do you need to see from Marcel to think that we're going to win this game? And I think the consensus is you don't need an A+ performance from Marcel. He hasn't given one yet. I mean, I think a B+ performance from Marcel wins us most, if not all of our games.
Yes.
And I'm going to get you off topic for a second, actually, because this question just popped in my head.
Okay.
Because we're talking about all these quarterbacks. And I think as a whole this year, you're not seeing like the Tim Tebow, Cam Newton, Joe Burrow type of standouts. Like, do you think there's a quarterback in college football right now that is ahead above the rest?
Ahead above the rest, I'd say that there are definitely some really good quarterbacks. I think like Dante Moore at Oregon played a really good game at Penn State. Fernando Mendoza is living up to the transfer hype at Indiana. I think even like the freshmen are getting me excited. I think, I don't want to fall into the DJ Lagway trap again from last year where it's just like you expect them to keep climbing up and up, and maybe it's just a flash in the pan. But I think I'm going to try to pronounce his name right. There's this Cal quarterback, Jaron Kiave Sagapalutele. I think I pronounced that right. But yeah, no, he's been lighting it up late night. He looks really exciting. There's a guy, Malik Washington at Maryland, that looks really good. I would say that the quarterback scene in college football is definitely not as good as it's been in previous years. And that's the thing, man. This is a time to be really grateful for Marcel Reed, because I think he genuinely is like one of the 15 or 20 best quarterbacks in college football, and one of the few guys that is showing that he can make big time plays for his team week in and week out.
Consistency transfer from last year, because there are a lot of transfer quarterbacks that have worked out well, and then you look at guys like Jackson Arnold and that experiment failed. So having that experience from year one is huge, and having that connection with Colin Klein, because I think beginning of the season Marcel throws deep balls that don't hit, but we don't see us retracting from that strategy. I mean, you still put faith in Marcel, and you still put faith in KC and Craver and Bussy to go up and grab those balls. So I think that's a big change from last year too, is when your offense is centered around your quarterback, you see a lot wider open of a playbook. So I'm, as much as I am with you leaning on our run game, I think once we can do that, we kind of have our offense at will where we can see those big plays and explosive plays that we didn't see last year. I mean, that's been a huge part of our offense that probably won us the game at Notre Dame, is being able to score points despite
Yep.
being scored on, which is not a common occurrence for an A&M offense, something we haven't seen in a long time. So I will be expecting the style in which we play to change throughout the game if we can control the game on the ground. With that being said, our offense is kind of covered. What do you want to see from our defense?
That's a good question. I think for our defense, the big thing for me is, just making sure to continue avoiding those really big plays through the air. I think that's been a relative strength for us throughout the year. I mean, there have been teams that have moved the ball, but it's taken them a while. They have to sustain drives. That's kind of what we're doing, is we're forcing these teams to, we're not inviting them to gun it down the field on us. I keep going back to that Auburn game last year, and USC game last year, and it's just stuff like that that definitely scares you at times. Even the LSU game, I feel like Nussmeier really got his fair share of opportunities and took advantage of all of those. So yeah, no, I think Mississippi State is absolutely a team that wants to start off by running the ball, and they're going to go up tempo, and they're going to try to catch you off guard, and they're going to take shots. That's how they shocked Arizona State. Is all it takes is that one play where you get to the line quick and our defense is caught off guard, and that's exactly how they want to beat us. Yep, exactly. So I think absolutely it's just that discipline defensively to, if they move the ball. I'm expecting Mississippi State to move the ball. I'm not going to freak out if that's the case, but you've got to bottle things up to an extent and make sure that they can't change the game in 1 to 2 plays. They need to change it in, 10 to 15 plays.
Because we haven't seen our offense and our defense click together yet. We've seen the Notre Dame game, that's an offensive shootout. We saw Auburn, that's a defensive battle. We haven't seen them put together yet. Did you go into Auburn expecting to see the 40-plus point performance that we've seen previously?
No, not necessarily. I expected us to score somewhere in the 20s, and honestly, I feel like we moved the ball more than well enough to do that. If some certain drives have ended different ways, so I don't expect us to score like we're a mid 2010s Big 12 team every week, but or like some of the A&M teams in the past. I mean, we have had some really explosive offenses back in the Kevin Sumlin days. But yeah, no, I think I expected more from the offense in terms of finding the end zone, but I think they honestly moved the ball a little more consistently than I expected. I just figured that some more of those big plays would come our way. Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good. I expected it to be high scoring, which is how I subconsciously knew it would not be high scoring, because it never ends up the way that you expect. But so we've kind of talked about what aspects of the game we expect to see kind of blow up. So are you going into this game expecting a high scoring game? And then are you going into this game expecting it to be a close game?
I think my honest prediction would be that it is a higher scoring game. It's not super close. I do think that Mississippi State will stay within 2 touchdowns, but I'm thinking this could be like a 30-20 type of win. Like I think Mississippi State is going to have their nice drives. They've shown that week in and week out against some really good defenses, like against Tennessee. I know they kind of benefited off of some fluky turnovers. Tennessee dropped some passes. That's something we can't do, by the way. I mean, they are very tenacious with those tips and drop passes. So, I mean, I trust our guys. They're very sure-handed. But yeah, no, I think this will be a more fun game than last week, and more ups and downs as a fan for sure. But I also don't think that they have this really dominant defense that's going to really scare us when it comes to putting the game away with our run game. I think there could be a lot of fireworks in the first half, but in the second half, we get down to it and keep their offense off the field. That's kind of how I see it going.
So I think that's where your point in just having the offense run the ball and extend plays is going to win the game is because I think we have more depth than Mississippi State. And
Oh
when
yeah.
you're playing 60 minutes of football, if you're just going quick, fast pace, you're getting the offense on and off the field in 2 minutes. That's not
Oh yeah.
going to work in your favor. So I think that is where we find success because I've been saying it, like you can't expect your offense to put up 40+ points every game. That's not how A&M works. That's not how the SEC works.
No.
And we've seen flashes from our defense now. So we should at least have a little bit of faith that these two can come together. So I kind of like marrying in the middle, 30-point game, 30-20. That's
Yeah.
I can run with that.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a fun game, compared to last week. I wouldn't mind more fireworks if it comes at the expense of giving up a few more frustrating big plays. But yeah, no, that's the thing with Mississippi State is as you mentioned, is they're going up tempo and they're trying to move the ball at all costs, and it's going to come at the expense of their defense because they have very quick drives. So absolutely, explosive first half and a little more ground and pound in the second half. Yeah, I think we're in lockstep with that.
A lot of people feel depleted from last week is because they got used to those explosive plays. And then
Yep.
you have a game where you put 13 points or 16 points on the board, and it's very easy to be frustrated. But I think that's where I want to see a turnaround this weekend. Just for confidence sake, is Marcel to have a couple of those explosive plays because, last week they were, part of it was there and the penalties taken away. The other part of it is, inaccuracies. So just for him to have that, and I think also from like a Craver, this is his prior team, to see him bust one open would just be fun for the sake of college football.
Oh, yeah.
But I think we are going to see a lot more variety from our offense because we're going to be able to control the clock.
Yeah.
At least that's the hope. But if we can control that aspect of it, I think Colin Klein is going to be able to run his offense at will. And our defense will just have to keep pace, which they've shown that they can do.
Yeah, no, I think that's another good point that you bring up with Marcel is I do think that he needs to have that game where he puts everything together and it gives him more of that confidence going into our bigger road games. I don't want to see him timid. I know that he wasn't necessarily timid on the road last year, but man, for him to not even just an A+ game, but for him to finally have like an A minus type of game, I think that would be very big for him at home. Just hit big plays, don't turn the ball over, maybe a little more consistent accuracy than usual. I think he'll have the opportunity for all of that stuff, and I do think that they're going to make it a point to feed Craver more this week because guys don't lead the nation in receiving yards after 3 games by accident. I think they realized last week, got to throw more screens, got to take more shots to him, and I think they'll do that.
Because he'll go up and grab those balls. We have plenty of athletes on our side of the ball.
Yeah.
But you bring up a good point going into these road games, which at the beginning of the season, nothing's changed. LSU, Texas, Missouri, those were all expected to be big games. But I think just our schedule as a whole has shifted as college football has played itself out. And I think the expectations now are a little bit different than they were at the beginning of the season. I think an 8-4, 9-3 ceiling was average amongst most people. But given that we're 4-0, we have Mississippi State, Florida at home, and then a lot of these teams don't look necessarily as good as they were projected to. So how has your view and expectations for this season changed, and how do you expect the rest of the season to play out? I don't need you to make a record prediction, but just from an overall bird's eye view.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely when you go out and beat Notre Dame, that's not a game that I was expecting us to win, especially after Notre Dame lost to Miami. I was like, oh boy, they've got this bye week. Marcus Freeman is going to really iron things out. They're going to come out motivated to make things right because that's exactly what they did last year when they had a devastating early season loss. So that definitely shifted things for me. And, I very much agreed, like 8-4, 9-3. I wasn't super excited. I didn't think that this team was different than last year, to be honest, but they've shown that they are. So I think absolutely our ceiling at this point, I think our reasonable expectation is to make the college football playoff. I don't know if that means hosting a game or getting a bye. I still think would be unreasonable, but I think the reasonable expectation at this point would just be to get into the college football playoff and double digit wins. I think, like 10-2 is very much in play, I would say, especially with, LSU's win at Clemson proving to not be as terrifying as it felt when they come out of the gate and did that. And, Texas and Arch Manning just really hasn't cleaned things up a ton. I mean, we'll see it. SEC play is what will tell us everything about him. And he's got a tough one against a good Florida defense, despite their struggles. I think it's a good defense. And Mizzou, we always knew Mizzou would be a tough one, but a very winnable one. So I think my perspective has shifted from hang around in the playoff race for most of the year to stay in the playoff picture for most of the year and ultimately make it. And I think 10-2 is the expectation that most fans would have right now.
Right. Which it's a very interesting way the schedule aligned is to have 3 home games in a row and then not come back to Kyle Field until November, if that's right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's nice to have Notre Dame at the start of your season to give you that test. I don't think we had that last year. I don't think our first true test was South Carolina, and then we saw South Carolina ended up. So having that Notre Dame win, even though it's not a conference win, I think, which again, people love to argue about non-negotiables, but that has, I think, lit a fire under this team that we haven't seen. And again, it's not even October yet. So if you're waiting for the annual Aggie collapse that in November, then you can keep waiting because it's a long ways until we get there. But there are a lot of things that have shaken out in the SEC as a whole that no one predicted. I mean, you talked about DJ Lagway. That's in and of itself. Everyone predicted him to be a top 5 quarterback, and Florida's just in the dumps right now, which maybe that Billy Napier can save his job this Saturday. I don't know. But the SEC as a whole, if we're looking at it, give me a team that is overperformed and give me a team that is underperformed up to this point.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the team that has really impressed me in the SEC is Tennessee. I think everyone kind of thought of Tennessee as, they got into this offseason mess. I wasn't very high on Nico. I didn't think that he was that great last year, but I also felt like, bringing in a late transfer quarterback from the group of 5 and Joey Aguilar, it's just clearly you never want to have an offseason that's completely disrupted out of nowhere. And you have to teach a new quarterback the new offense without as much time as you would expect to anytime you bring in a transfer. And I felt like their defense would also regress a bit by losing some of their best players to the NFL. So I've been really impressed by them. I think, honestly, they outplayed Georgia and just some really tough breaks down the stretch of that game. And, they also kind of some fluky stuff against Mississippi State, those drops that led Mississippi State back into the game. I think that offense is truly amazing, and they've significantly upgraded at quarterback, and their defense is also still showing a lot of promise. So I would say Tennessee has overperformed for sure. In terms of a team that's underperforming, I mean, Florida's the easy pick. Man, that is tough because there are so many teams in the SEC that are doing great things. I would say LSU, honestly. I think at this point you'd have to say LSU is underperformed strictly from the standpoint of I thought their offense would be absolute dynamite by returning Garrett Nussmeier and Aaron Anderson. And I felt like they had a lot of flashes in the pan last year, even against us. And I felt like, LSU, the year 2 starters have really worked out for them. We saw Joe Burrow had a pretty nice year, and then he had an amazing one. Then Jaden Daniels had a decent year, and then an amazing one. And I sort of felt like that might continue in their offense. It's just been a massive disappointment. I think Garrett Nussmeier might be playing hurt, honestly, but that's just a mess for them. And I don't really trust them to win any of these big games unless they can get into a really sloppy one at home, that their defense can win, like the Florida game. I mean, it's just Clemson isn't who we thought they were. And that's the only time that Garrett Nussmeier has played a really clean game on offense. So he's been a big disappointment for me. And I think LSU is probably outside my top 5 SEC teams at this point.
Yeah. Clemson game almost hurt them in a way. Expecting Clemson to be this really good team, you go into Clemson and you win, but you don't see any of the big problems that you have revealed because Clemson is not who everyone said they were.
Yep.
So then you have to get to the Florida game, and then you start to find out, okay, there's a lot of glaring issues. And then you go into Ole Miss, and those just get bust wide open by Lane Kiffin, like he loves to do. So, yeah, and they talked about bringing in a new O-line from the transfer portal. Like, there were tons of high praises for this LSU team, and their offense just hasn't impressed me at all.
Yeah, no, and I would also say it's a really bad look for Brian Kelly to, attack the media, as Mike Elko joked about after that Florida game, and insist that everything's going great and everyone's ungrateful. Right. And then, of course, everyone knew that they were winning sort of unsustainably, and they get into a game with Ole Miss and they just get completely outclassed. So I don't know how the LSU players will respond to that stuff from Brian Kelly. Like, I know he was sort of trying to defend them, but in a sense, he made them a complacent team as they got into some of those bigger games. And I don't know how that's going to shake out for them down the stretch. I don't really know how you recover from your team realizing that you were overhyped, and you're part of the reason why they probably felt better about themselves than they should have.
Think he went into the season on the hot seat, but I think being in Baton Rouge, there's an expectation to win national championships. And so his job was not 100% secure. And then you go into this Ole Miss game, and then your press conference, you're kind of throwing your own players under the bus and talking about Garrett Nussmeier needs to play better. Everyone needs to play better. So there's a lack of accountability there. And I just haven't seen the culture that Brian Kelly brings to a school like LSU mesh. And at this point, I don't think they ever will. I mean, if you can't do it with a Heisman winning quarterback, when are you going to do it?
Nah. Yeah. No. I mean, for me, it's like he's had great offenses and he's had great defenses, and nothing's ever been clicking at the right time. And, that's the formula to contend for national titles. And I don't think that it's good to have a coach that's so result oriented in how, like, he talks to the media. Like, I don't like a coach that acts like everything is fine and then everything is horrible after every win and every loss. He's just not a level-headed guy. And to me, that's
find
always
security in that.
Yeah, no, to me, that's always like a major red flag in a coach. And you can just tell that he's always a little uptight, and it's just not a good look. And I do think that sooner rather than later, even if the wins and losses don't necessarily justify it, LSU is going to move on from it, I think.
And I think I don't know if funny is the right word, but to go into an Ole Miss team who is starting Trinidad Chambliss, who came from FBS, which Lane Kiffin, I don't love the guy, but he is very good at developing quarterbacks, which I think was said about Hugh Freeze, and I haven't seen Hugh Freeze do that. So
no,
it's
worse than Brian Kelly.
Yeah, I will give Lane Kiffin his flowers for that one thing. You have Trinidad Chambliss lead them to a win. I mean, I think the SEC this year has been a big story of first-year starters. Bama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee. I mean, Mississippi State kind of was flipping back and forth last year, same as us. So
yeah,
I think most of the guys leading the SEC right now are first-year starters, as opposed to those people like Garrett Nussmeier that we talked about were expected to lead the conference, and they're just not.
Yeah.
It's kind of flipped over on its head a little bit.
Absolutely.
I 100% agree. I think if there's any year to do it, it's now.
Yep.
We have a very long streak of not winning in Death Valley. They have a long streak of not winning in Kyle Field, so 1-for-1. But we just ran down this LSU team. Their offense is not what they should be. They have a good defense, but I mean, any LSU team, aside from the past 2 years, is going to have a good defense. So that's always something to worry about. But I would not be surprised if A&M goes into Death Valley this year and takes that one.
No, no, absolutely not. And I think you just looking back to the game last year, they had major problems with as good as their defense is. I mean, it was still good last year, and Marcel Reed came out and he gave them major problems. They're still starting those same linebackers that he kept running around. I mean, he was just running circles around their defense, and I think it's going to be a close game when you have a good defense. That's LSU's superpowers that they're going to drag basically anyone into an ugly game, especially when you got to go on the road and you're already at such a disadvantage in Death Valley. But no, I absolutely think that this is a huge, huge opportunity, and they absolutely can do it. I did not expect going into the year to feel good about our chances in on the road against LSU or Texas, but I would say that LSU game is feeling that's probably the game that my expectations for have elevated the most. Like I was
Mhm.
just totally writing that one off and now absolutely think it's 50-50.
So would you say the Texas game would be the most concerning game on our schedule?
I would still say so, just because of how well their defense played against us last year, and
Mhm.
I still think that their defense is really really good. We'll see with Arch, but I also do feel like him having that home game, not having to go into Kyle Field, like it's all going to be really tough. Not necessarily because of the crowd, but just the fact I'm not necessarily concerned about their crowd. I'm more so concerned about the fact that Arch Manning and that offense doesn't have to deal with the crowd that they did last year, where they still went out and got it done. So that's still the most concerning game for me.
I think I'm on the same page. I've had a weird feeling about this LSU game all year where I feel like if it's the year, it's going to be this one. Again, it's LSU, so our curse could continue just as it has in the past few years. But given our track record this year, we've been on the trend of breaking curses. We broke the college game day curse. We broke the Ted
Yep.
Cruz curse. So,
That's the biggest one. Yeah.
I mean, I would say those are fairly notable. For those outside of A&M, probably not. But for anyone who's ever put on maroon, that is it's a big win in itself.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I think most people at this point are bought in to Mike Elko. I would not be surprised if anyone has concerns. Again, we can't just give him all the credit for being 4-0. I mean, there's still 3 more months left of football. But given how we saw the Jimbo era go and how I see the Mike Elko era going, it seems to be a noticeable shift.
Oh yeah, and I think of course, there's still more to see. Like Jimbo early in his tenure, he was the one. I mean, he obviously would have gotten us to the playoff in this new format, and that's the big deal. That's really what it's going to take for people to be convinced that A&M has taken a step up as a program. Like you mentioned it earlier. Like it's not even October. Like there's so much time,
Yeah.
and they've leaped through some bridges that they haven't in the past. But still,
There are many more to go.
many, many more to go. But it definitely seems like more upbeat culture, more consistency now is what we're seeing, and doing things that we just couldn't do in the past, and having more fun on offense than I think they ever had with Jimbo. I mean,
Yeah.
we had some great players, but I'm taking this offense over even the 2021. Like they were just
Yeah.
winning games a different way. So
Yeah, I am in 100% agreement. But that's why I think this past game was so telling is that our offense has been the star of the show for 4 games, for 3 games, and then our defense takes care of business when our offense might not have necessarily been the ones leading the charge. So, with that being said, our shining star of the week is Torian York, who is our captain. And I think this is objectively probably his best game wearing maroon. I mean, he had 7 total tackles, pass breakup. I want to say 1 sack and a tackle for loss.
yeah,
So I got to give him his flowers because most of our MVPs have come from offense for the past 3 games in a row. 40 games a game will do that. But to see not only your defense, but your captains step up and make notable plays that changed the momentum of the game when it kind of seemed like momentum was shifting back and forth. especially after that drought in the first half, is huge. And I think is a testament to what Mike Elko has done with this defense as a whole. So I'm very excited to see them continue to tread on for many more games because we've got a long road ahead. It's the SEC.
Absolutely. I mean, we'll see. That was a really good game for York, and I think I'll be thinking about that one-handed sack for a while. I don't know how he did that, but yeah, no, I think it's just really cool to see, huge performances from guys like York, and even like the Cassius Howell game against Utah State.
Yeah.
We'll see if he can replicate something along those lines. But yeah, no, it's just really cool to see some of our players performing the best they have ever performed, including, York and Des Ricks too. I think that's the guy I feel most inclined to shout out just relative to what people thought of him going into the season. York is delivering and other guys are improving. So that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, because I mean, there's injury bug is always going to happen. We go into this game without Bryce Anderson and without Scooby, which I think was a big concern for people. But multiple guys stepped up, multiple different places. I mean, our defense had control of that game the whole time. I mean, as close as the score looked, it never really felt close. And I will take it from a momentum, from a team culture, team mindset standpoint. The box score is close, but I mean, anyone who watched that game could tell you that it wasn't close.
No. I mean, you know how close a game is just based on how stressed you are down the stretch, and when you're frustrated instead of stressed, that's how you know that it just wasn't really a close game. I think that was just the mood for everyone in the stadium was frustration, but not necessarily panic. Versus, I think about like the Bowling Green game last year. I was genuinely panicking. Like, what on earth is going on? Like, there were moments where I was like, oh my God, are we going to lose? Is this going to be App State 2.0?
Yeah.
So absolutely, I'll take that shift any day of the week. I'd much rather be stressed than terrified. So
yeah, and it's almost a privilege that we haven't had before, is to be able to be frustrated after winning games.
Yeah.
I think we've always been in a spot where it's you take what you get and you just forget about it. But I think because we've been so successful, I've seen people almost be more critical. I think it somehow makes your BAS flare up even more. Is the better we do, the worse you feel. So I would mark it as a privilege for us to be able to be so nitpicky with both sides of the ball. But I like where this team is headed. Again, I take it with a grain of salt because 2016, as we talked about, it's all fun and games until it's not. But I think this team has a very good head on their shoulders of taking it one game at a time. I think Auburn was the first true test of, can you continue to play your football with a target on your back?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's always, any time your program is undergoing some sort of rebuild, you can have like that exciting year one where no one had championship expectations or even contention expectations, and you win games that you didn't expect to. And that's kind of what happened last year. And it almost felt like we performed to the point where people's expectations got too high for the team. And then you get into a year two where they're also outperforming expectations. And now we're getting to the point where I do think it's very reasonable to be frustrated when we're barely beating some of the bottom teams in the SEC, because everyone knows the opportunity that this team is going to have to play in heavyweight games in the SEC down the stretch. So, as expectations shift, emotions do too. But I do think it's very important, as you said, to realize that it's a privilege to be frustrated instead of sad or stressed. I mean, that's just kind of where we're at. So
you said it perfectly. And our final segment that leads us into our final segment is the fire pit, which you don't need to have any, but we usually cover a hot take that you have about this A&M team and then a hot take you have about college football as a whole. So do you have one for either of those categories?
Ooh, that's a good one. For this A&M team, I think that is tough.
It's hefty.
I've got an interesting. I don't know how hot this is, but
it could be medium.
I think that despite Mario Craver's really fast start, I honestly do think that KC is the best receiver on this team and will probably end up having an even bigger year than him. I mean, I've just liked what I've seen with him and Marcel. I think that they haven't hit those big plays yet, but I feel like it's coming, and I think that I'm really high on KC, even honestly more so than Mario in the sense where I think he could play himself into like, first round talks with the NFL draft. Like I think KC could really be like the most exciting player to come out of A&M since Devon Achane in terms of, the national hype that could come for him. I think that there's a lot of hype that is just waiting to leave the station with him. And I guess that's my sort of semi-hot take just because of how productive Craver has been, and he's kind of the talk of the passing game. But I think KC is still wide receiver 1 for me, and that's no shade to Craver. I just think that there's really big things ahead for him, and I'm excited to see him break through with more of those. Outside of the punt return, he just hasn't had that really, really big moment, and I think it's going to happen in one of these big games down the stretch. So that would be my moderately hot take for A&M. And I guess my hot take for college football, I mean, there's this one is I would say I have a fair amount of hot takes. I think a team that I am like dangerously high on right now, and people would probably just have written them off after the Texas Tech loss, is Utah. I think this is just out of nowhere, but I think Utah is going to end up winning the Big 12. I think even though they're unranked right now, I think they're doing some really good things. They have Devon Dampier, who I think is a very good quarterback, and I think they got punched in the face by a Tech team that's really talented, and it's interesting to see Tech finally putting it together. But I think that Big 12 is kind of jumbled up, and I don't think it's Arizona State. I don't think it's TCU. I think that they could get back, honestly, against Texas Tech later in the season, just because, Utah has a history of under Kyle Whittingham of, sneaking into those conference title games and really giving teams tough times. So I think Utah ends up winning the Big 12. I don't know. That's just one of my hot takes.
I like that one. We'll bookmark it. We'll visit that in December.
We'll see. Yeah, absolutely.
No, and to your KC point, I think KC's stats are already abnormally better than any of our receivers last year. And the only reason they're not higher is because of those missed balls, like you talked about. I mean, just was it UTSA game in itself, he could have an additional 80 yards from one play.
And even last week, I think, does my memory deceive me, or was he the one that got overthrown on like 60-yarder?
I think he was. He had some big plays. I mean, our first touchdown drive, I think he had like a 24-yard reception.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that seems to be Marcel's number one guy. Marcel was a huge piece in getting him to A&M in the first place. Given the way their offense is structured, I do still think Marcel views him as wide receiver 1, despite Craver obviously being who he is, which I have no problem with. Obviously,
no,
not a bad problem to have. Because, I mean, anytime I see those receivers make plays, it just is such, like, I am awestruck because of what we dealt with last year. So
truly,
I love the idea of KC not even hitting his ceiling, and we're only 4 games into the year, so it really does seem like it can only go up. Oh, yeah, Notre Dame game.
Yeah.
I think every game this season there's been a missed deep ball from Marcel to KC that just hasn't been hit yet.
It's coming, and I'm honestly, I think it's good that we're saving it for a game in the future,
Yes,
like
you can't use it all up.
We haven't hit our ceiling in the passing game, and that's crazy to think about. So, hopefully he can get like Texas on a deep ball, Jeremiah Smith type vibes in that Texas game earlier in the year. Hopefully we can recreate that. Wouldn't that be something? But
that must be what we're seeing you for, I'm sure.
Yeah, no.
But I think we're both pretty bought into A&M winning this football game. I think I feel more confident than I did against Auburn just because of the circumstances the week prior. I feel good about both sides of the ball. So I think we can lock in A&M.
Yeah, I think, and it's weird for me because I feel like Mississippi State's a better team than Auburn, but I feel like Auburn was a scarier matchup, like honestly
Yeah.
by a decent amount. So it's a weird feeling going into this one, but yeah, no, that's about how I feel. I feel pretty confident that we'll win.
Okay. We're bookmarking it. This is our official prediction. A&M wins the game. Score doesn't matter as long as we have more points. But
Exactly.
we threw out a 30-20 earlier, so we can keep that on the back burner if that happens
Sure.
to come to fruition.
That
But
would be great.
with all that being said, that kind of covers it all. So, Nico, tell the people where they can find you. I know you're not just on Twitter. I know you're kind of everywhere, covering
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, no, I definitely I'm on TikTok, Elite Takes, I'm on YouTube. I don't post there as often as I should, but yeah, no, I'm on Instagram too. So yeah, no, just Elite Takes on just about all platforms. I'm mainly an NFL guy, but I do a fair amount of college football content on Saturdays. I probably should post more Aggie stuff, I just if people want to see more of that, I would absolutely love to have more of an A&M following, and yeah, no, that's where you can find me. I'm sorry, your audio was like a little quiet. Shoot, I don't know what's going on.
Oh wait, can you
Oh, there you
not
go.
wait?
There you go.
Can you
There
hear
you
me?
go. There you
Okay,
go.
okay.
I'm
Will you
sorry.
be at the game on Saturday?
Yes, I will. I
Okay,
will. Of course.
okay,
Got the shirt ready, so it's gonna be a fun
perfect.
time. You can't miss the blackout game and the
Oh
new end
no,
zones apparently that they're
I
gonna
know.
reveal.
They're getting me a little overexcited. I always gotta hold my breath when they bring out something new.
We'll
But
see.
blackout is we're 1-0 in blackout, so
Yeah. No, I
certainly
mean,
history will repeat itself.
I absolutely hope. I mean, that to this point is probably my favorite moment as an Aggie fan was the blackout game last year. That's just like really turned a corner for us and momentum
And
continues. So yeah,
we're looking to repeat it. But I will send all the A&M people your way, and I will tell them
awesome.
to look out for your content because I will
Awesome.
be expecting some live tweets from this game.
Of course, of course. I need to ramp that up a bit. People don't know what I'm talking about sometimes when I tweet A&M games, which is funny because I tweeted like you can't be serious after that screen
Oh
got
yeah,
intercepted and ran back, and everyone's like, "What's going on?" So yeah,
context.
no, yeah,
No, I will
I'd love
get
to get
all
more
the
in
people
touch
your
with
way.
A&M. Awesome. Yeah, no,
Yes.
I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for joining me. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
And it's always fun when we're winning. So we're hoping to keep the streak alive. And I will see you alongside 100,000 other people on Saturday at the blackout game.
Absolutely.
And we will see where this team goes from here, but expecting big things.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, this was a great time and I feel as confident as ever, hashing all of this out, I think we're both excited for good reason. Yeah, no. Thanks for having
Yeah, it
me
was
on.
therapeutic in itself to just kind of
Exactly.
really break it down.
Yep. All right.
Well, thank you for joining me. Everyone have a great Tuesday night. There are 4 days until college football returns on Saturday. So until then, have a great week, everyone. Thank you, Nico, again.
Yeah, thank you. It's great.